You're listening to Parasearch Radio. News, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or their affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are obviously here again for our usual Thursday show. Carl's not here tonight, so I'm running the interview, so to speak. And obviously this is our first to last interview, obviously, with one of the Sage Paracon speakers. And this is obviously a different kind of show this evening, as well as a different type of guest. This lovely gentleman obviously is in the Wiccan side of things and paganism and witchcraft things. So obviously it's going to be interesting to get this different side of what we do. And obviously I've said it twice already. They're all going to have a counter. And may as well introduce tonight's guest. And obviously I've said it again. Obviously, tonight's guest is Ashley Mortimer. I can't even say your name now. Ashley Mortimer. Good evening, Ashley. How are you?
I'm very well, and you've done rather well because mostly it's me who can't remember my own name. So welcome.
And how are you?
How am I? Well, there was some hot gases that cooled down, and then it became a planet, and then from there we crawled out of the primordial soup, and that's how I came about. But is that too smart ass an answer? Oh, excuse me, an answer.
No, that's
fine.
A very good answer. That is.
I'm fine, Sam. I'm doing absolutely fine, and it's lovely to speak to you, and it's lovely to be here.
Great stuff. So, I've said it again. That's all I'm going to be saying. All that.
I'll tell you what, you have obviously, and I'll have basically for the evening. How's that?
Yeah. So, would you like to give us a little bit of an insight of who you are?
Well, I can try. So yes, as you know, I'm interested in paganism and witchcraft. I've spoken on the radio, television, and lots of media places about paganism and witchcraft. I am a witch, a practicing witch, in a modern sense. I'm a member of the craft, an initiate of the Craft of the Wise, and I've been representing the Doreen Valiente Foundation and the Centre for Pagan Studies for several years, both of which are non-profit organisations whose goal is to spread information, correct and accurate information about what witchcraft and paganism is to the wider public, because I think that quite a lot of the time pagans and witches are misunderstood, particularly by the media, present company accepted, of course. So I've been a bit of a spokesman on the subject for a few years, and it's been said once or twice that I know a bit about stuff that I can answer a few questions. So that's part of the reason why I'm involved with Paracon, because I had an interesting slant to the proceedings when it comes to talking about non-physical entities and non-physical existence. So who I am, it's my life's quest to figure it out, and I haven't done so yet, but I'm trying.
So how did you get into all of this side?
So do you want the glamorous answer or the truthful one?
Truthful. If you want to see the truthful one.
Well, no, I don't mind that at all. So the truthful answer is that when I was growing up, and in the late 1970s, early 80s, all the cool kids in school were listening to things like Black Sabbath and music like that. And there was a lot of artwork that was supposedly inspired by occult symbols and occult symbology. And I was just interested in that, and it was through that sort of thing that I wanted to find out what the real story was. And I heard names like Aleister Crowley, and I wanted to research and I was interested in those sort of things. And it was over time that I began to realise that my interest in the occult was leading me towards opinions, spiritual views about the way the world and the universe works, about gods, goddesses, and that sort of thing. And I found that perhaps if there was a God, for me as a teenager, if there was a God, he wasn't in a stone building every Sunday morning. He was out there in the wilds and in nature. And I think it took me a while before I kind of embraced the word pagan, but that's probably what I was, and probably more so than I am now, because now I know a bit about it. The intellectual stuff gets in the way of the real knowledge, but that's true of all humans. We know a lot more as children We remember more about the universe and about the way things work, and the spirits and energies are like that. And us incarnated in flesh, we've got so much. What's the word? So much baggage. You know, we go through our lives worrying about cars and roads and stuff like that. I mean, you know, you could have a stroke every day just worrying about the state of things. So we lose some of that spiritual knowledge. You see, I've started rambling already. I don't know whether they warned you, but if you like my blue touch paper, and then I do go off. So, you know, just chill out there and just cut me off where necessary, please.
No,
I should imagine your producers are having a stroke now.
No, you're fine. We love guests who ramble. So
I wasn't threatening to ramble, just to carry, you know, just to go on for hours and hours. And hours. I suppose that is rambling, really. So there you go. That was my answer. It started off because I rebelled against the church and I rebelled against adults, like most teenagers do. And you know, that's what rock and roll music was invented for, was so that you could, you know, cock a snook to your parents. And that's what I did. But for me, it became the occult, an interest in that sort of thing, and then later spirituality, religion, and then paganism and witchcraft. Because witchcraft is, in fact, a modern pagan religion.
Yeah, and of course they all fit and tie in together, don't they? They all live like spirituality, paganism, witchcraft.
Yeah, that's right. Paganism is a big umbrella term for lots and lots of different beliefs and practices, of which modern-day witchcraft, or Wicca, as people call it, is only one of them. Is only one stream in that thing. But it was a very significant one because it was the one that came to prominence during the last century, during the last 50 years or so, in riding the crest of perhaps what you might call the New Age revival. And of course, we have I've often said this before. I've often talked about this when we've been talking about paranormal, the scene, the world, the community. We're very similar communities. The difference is that we have these beliefs, and because we've labelled them spiritual, then we get kind of European backing to not be discriminated against because we've got beliefs that don't fit with the mainstream. And that's where the word pagan comes from. It's a Latin word that the Romans used to describe people who didn't fit in with their mainstream idea of religion, which ironically was as close to modern paganism as it is as far away from Christianity. Multiple gods, multiple deities, and the idea that human beings can cheekily contact and interact with the world of the divine and the spirit.
Yeah, and I don't like, obviously, if people who were listening in, what I found, which I was really interested in getting you on, I've found that more people now in the community, which I'm involved in, and you're obviously involved in a little bit, that you're getting more pagans in it, and obviously more pagans are coming forward.
Is that true? I didn't know that. That's not something I've been a little bit out of touch and a bit off the radar this last year. So
that's what I've seen. I don't know if it's true or not. But
no, well, that may be the case. That may well be the case. And you know, I think there's a great deal, aside from the way that we're treated by the mainstream. I think there's a great deal of crossover between the way that we approach the universe and the world around us, the paranormal community people and the pagans and the witches. I think there's a great deal that we have in common. But then personally, I think we've all got a lot in common. You know. I think human beings and our journey through life and our incarnation gives us quite a lot of common ground that we quite often put to one side. And thanks to perhaps some of the stuff I was saying that we get away from too much with our modern world and our grown-upness, we get away from the fact that we're all actually connected and part of the same source of things. And spiritually, that's really where I think we all are. Just if only we could find more of the common ground and less of the reasons to fall out and argue, you know?
Yeah.
But then, I mean, we were close to the ancient pagan civilizations. I mentioned Rome, and the Greeks were the same. They're myths and mysteries that talk about the relationships between living beings and the spiritual side of physical beings and the divine and the gods. I mean, if you look at the Greek myths, the gods and the human beings were bedding each other all the time, weren't they? I mean, it was, you know, there was a great deal of connection there that perhaps we in a modern society have somewhat lost. And that's where modern paganism has picked up a thread and maybe a necessity for human beings to want to reach up to discover their spiritual side again. You know, and I think some people have. I think we've lost our human beings have lost their besottedness with the material world and with money and finance and everything else. I think it's losing its shine. I think the scales are falling from people's eyes and they're turning more to spirituality and, in fact, alternate spirituality. And you know, I mean, I'm sure the people who are supposedly trying to control the world, the Donald Trumps and the New World Order, they'd be all having a stroke at the thought of us rebelling up and re-embracing our spirituality. So anyway, oh gosh, you really have rambled now, haven't I?
We have our first question in the chat room for you, Ashley.
Unfortunately, I'm not quite logged into the chat room at the moment, so yeah, you'll have to. So it'll come as a surprise to me. So I'm not already aware of what it's going to be.
This one's from Liz Cormel. She says, Do you think, due to the destruction of the natural world, meaning that people are becoming more open to pagan natural beliefs?
I think I kind of already just said that, really. Yes, I do. I think people are starting to look at the planet, and I think that 100, 200 years ago, there was a lot of science that was all about industrializing and the Industrial Revolution, and it was all about us pushing science ahead and technology and doing some things that were quite harmful to the planet. And it's only in the last, I'm not saying there weren't conservationists or ecologists, but it's only now that it's becoming apparent that the damage that we, the human race, have done to our planet, it's becoming very apparent that that's not repairable. I mean, it's like turning off the oxygen supply in the intensive care unit. We are knocking down rainforests at a rate, and the world is. I think we've become disaffected with our society. It's become dystopian in some ways, and it can't last. I mean, I think spiritually and I would say magically, nothing can last. Nothing lasts forever, and the human beings will have been a blip in Earth's history at some point. And yet we still have a place in the cosmos, and that's an intriguing and appealing thing to anybody who's interested in spirituality. That idea that we have an eternity to ourselves, or at least a connection with the eternal spirit of the universe. That's who we are, and that's what we are. That's our very essence and our very substance. Gosh, I'm becoming all metaphysical now as well. Sorry, Sam.
It's fine. I find you very interesting, so you're okay.
I find you very interesting too. Thank you.
Liz has asked another question, obviously going on from the question she's just asked in your answer. She says, do you believe that Mother Earth will take revenge?
I'm not sure that I do. I don't know that revenge is the thing. You see, things happen to us. Things happen in our journey. And it's more of a question often of the way we see them and the way we view that. I don't think the universe does stuff to us. And I don't think the earth does stuff to us. So I can't see the earth, if we're going to give Mother Earth a spiritual identity, and I think she has one, and I did say she, if we're going to do that, then I'm not sure she's vengeful, and I'm not sure the universe and the cosmos is actually vengeful. I think it's more, it just is. That's just it. It's arbitrary. And somehow for us, especially, human beings like me who think too much and feel too much, a bit of a tendency to be emotional. We want it to have a reason and a rationale, but sometimes it just doesn't. And Mother Earth, as a concept, I don't, if it's that big a piece of being, of entity, of spirit, I think it might be a bit above revenge. I think it might just be more necessity, or even chance, or even just science. But I think it's right. It is going to overturn us. And the red giant that we're heading to, I don't think we'll reach that. I don't think the earth will burn up and the sun will burn up. I think we will be wiped out long before then by something, disease or whatever else. And that won't be vengeful. I think it'll just be either completely natural and necessary for the greater survival of the earth and its place in the universe, or it'll be entirely arbitrary. Entirely arbitrary. I'm a big fan of certain science fiction writers, people like Douglas Adams, who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and his notion that we place a lot of self-importance on ourselves. We're kind of besotted with ourselves, and we aren't that important. We might be just mostly harmless, and perhaps it is all arbitrary, and that's okay. But it's not an easy thing to reconcile. We don't want it to be. So, in some ways, it would suit us better to be. I mean, this is typical. This is kind of the human condition, isn't it? We'd much rather be wiped out by a vengeful Mother Earth than an arbitrary one. And in actual fact, neither really matters because, bang the rocks together and do the math, we're going to die. The human race is going to die out. And every one of us in it is going to get killed at some point in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Liz says, do you think it's going to restore balance then, or?
Well, you see, balance in magic as well, and especially in the occult, balance is a word that people throw around quite a lot. Oh yes, restoring the balance, but it depends from what perspective, and there's a big universe. We're very self-centric. So, I don't know. I kick a dog on the street today, another one bites me tomorrow. Is that balance? Well, maybe, but there's a bigger picture to be looked at, and I don't always think that cause and effect come in the same order. And I know that sounds weird. And I know that's the kind of weird thinking that people go, oh, those witches, they're all thinking weird things all the time. And best to keep away from them, The rationalists would have a stroke if they could hear me saying things like this. But I don't know about restoring balance. I think maintaining a continuous, ever-changing status quo is the premise of the universe. But I think that really deep down underneath that, it's only really got two functions, and that's to create and to destroy. And it breathes in and it breathes out. And the Big Bang happens and all the physical matter starts to occur. And then the big contraction happens and it all gets destroyed again. And that's a big cycle, and not one that we'll see, but one that we're part of. And that's the bit that intrigues me. That's the bit that gets me going. So I don't know. Yeah, I think I'm getting where Liz's question's coming from. And I do. I think there is a balance to be addressed or redressed, but I'm not sure that we're really in our incarnation capable of seeing that big picture enough to be able to perceive that properly. We're actually in the midst of it. We are part of that balancing act. We're probably stood at the fulcrum now, waiting to be annihilated so that we can be reborn again. Gosh, I've gone all philosophical now as well as metaphysical.
She's a different one. Question to obviously what you've just been talking about. Do you personally believe in fate?
Okay, fate. Okay, I believe the multi-worlds interpretation of Schrödinger's cat, and that is that there are a remarkable number, perhaps an infinite number of parallel lives and universes and realities that are going on all at the same time. So believing that, it's a matter of where you put your consciousness and your perspective. So, I'm going to use mixing my metaphors. I've just thought of a really good one that I was teaching one of my witchcraft students a few weeks ago. I don't know whether you're listeners or whether you remember the sort of piano rolls, the rolls of paper with the little holes in that used to go round and they would play the keys on a piano. Or maybe those music boxes with the little sticky up bits that pluck the right string. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes that our life and our journey through life, at least, is a bit like that. There are things coming our way, and it's a question of not so much being magical to attract things into your life. It's more a question of putting yourself in the path of something good that you can perceive is on its way to you. So I think there are multiple fates, and I don't think that there's any prescribed path to our lives. I think that the only, to coin a phrase and to be a bit of a cliche, the only constant is change. However, if we're perceptive about ourselves, then I believe we can put ourselves in the way of some events that are coming out in our direction that we can almost, I'm going to use the word carefully, but choose to accept as opposed to anything else, Somebody's thrown the baseball at our face, and we can either step out the way or we can recognize that it's not actually a baseball. It's a big bundle of happiness and love and kindness, and we'll just accept that. And even though it looks like it's going to smack us on the nose, we'll accept that. And so I watch people in life. There are people who do that, who do extraordinary things, and you think, why on earth did you do that? Why would you have chosen that? And then you see later that they've won that round of the universe sometimes, and trying to be that, trying to look for that happiness. For me, it's happiness and joy is the perception of things and figuring it out and thinking, oh, I'm not very good at living in the moment, and I wish I was better. But that's because I want to know what the next moment's bringing. And I've had some experiences, particularly in the last 12 months, that have been a bit shocking, and that have thrown me off the kilter a bit and made me look a bit more to the future. So, gosh, I don't know whether I've got away from answering the original question, but do I believe in fate? I think that all fates are happening or are capable of happening, and it's a matter of which one I'm choosing to put my conscious attention into at any given moment. And the thing that makes me choose is trying to know myself and to know my own being better still. And if you know yourself, you can know the universe and the gods. There's something in the Temple of Apollo has got markings that indicate that. Our ancestors knew this. Know yourself is how you know the gods. So you could perhaps, and maybe there are some pagans who do, could think of fate as being one of the gods. I think she's a woman. I think fate is a female, a femme fatale, who kind of casts her way across my life and weaves her way in and out, and occasionally trips me up and other times pushes me over the right cliff at just the right moment when I need to let go and do it. And then you can call it fate, but actually it's just beauty, truth, wonder, and perception and consciousness. God, there's a clever answer. Sorry.
That was an interesting answer, that was.
Whoa.
That's that last little bit. Because
something must have made me passionate. I must have got besotted with something recently.
Because I've never thought of it that way, how you're obviously bringing what you do across.
Really? Well, I mean, because I know everybody thinks, everybody, that's a really sweeping statement. You need to avoid that. A lot of people who don't know any better think that paganism and witchcraft and the occult is all about sitting in, sulfur fumes from an incense smoke and waving swords about and making pentagrams and doing spells and magic. And actually, the greatest magic you can do is to learn how to discover who you are and learn to know about yourself. And the purpose of all magic and everything and existence and reality is finding happiness. And, I'm happy. I'm so happy right now sitting talking about this stuff because it's what lights me up, what floats my boat. I mean, okay, sure, I've got other things that I like doing in my life because, I like a bit of fishing and some heavy rock and roll. But it makes me happy to be talking about this stuff. And really, the pursuit of happiness seems to me to be the end goal of our human condition and our existence. But, what makes us happy, I don't know. And it is having a different perspective. I love it. I love thinking of things differently. I could be wrong. In fact, I don't... it isn't Douglas Adams, is it? It's Richard Bach who wrote a book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull, which is on my recommended reading list for trainee witches absolutely every time. And he wrote a further book called Illusions, which is where he supposedly meets a man who is a master of the universe and a savior of the world. And the man gives him a book. And one of the lessons in the book, the great book of how to master the universe, it says, don't forget, everything in this book could be wrong. You never know. And it could. So maybe I'm wrong too. Maybe I'm just some, old wizard rambling away with his nonsense.
Maybe, I don't know.
No, I don't either. But, going to find out is great. And, finding out about myself is how I've seen the universe and the way I perceive things and the way other people do. And listening to other people's ideas and being taught things and shown things and being able to put them into action and become a little bit happier from doing so. I've been so blessed, Sam. I've lived a magical life since I turned my back on all of that stuff and rebelled as a teenager against all those things. I found some wonderful, wonderful experiences that people wouldn't believe. And people say to me, quite often people say, you've been lucky, haven't you? Or in the least recent times, they've said you've been unlucky. But I don't know. I don't know that it's fate or luck at all. I think it's about your own consciousness. It's about driving yourself forward through life with some awareness of what's going on. If you've got an IQ bigger than your shoe size, then you'll have worked out that you do have some semblance of choice in the way that you behave and feel and do and act towards yourself and others. So it comes back to that. God, I don't know if I've answered the question. I can't even remember what it was.
Yeah, you did. A few more questions have come in the chat room now. Debbie asks, do you feel that we as individuals can spiritually offset the negativity of others to balance society?
I think we do and we can, but I don't think that's necessarily conscious because I don't think we can always perceive things as a whole, as a holistic kind of outward. We haven't got the perception and the perspective to be able to do it as a whole. But yes, I think it's certainly true that, other people's bad deeds, and I'm going to use the word bad in a careful context, I think you can offset that by doing good things. I don't think, but then equally so, if you see somebody doing something good, I don't think that's an excuse to go out and do something bad, you know. I mean, because the balance is redressed both ways, and there's two kinds of balance, and I think this is an occult principle, that there's an active balance and a passive balance. Ultimately, the universe is balanced. It knows what it's doing, it's harmonious, and it's proceeding towards whatever fate awaits it anyway. So all acts could be seen as being part of that, and then it becomes a matter of whether we turn our conscious attention to being happy in what we're doing or not happy. But, you know, I think we can balance things out in society just by trying to be good. And I don't know, maybe it's not true of all human beings, but it's certainly true of most of the people I've met in my incarnation, and definitely the people I like to be close to and around. And that is that what makes us happy is seeing other people around us happy. You know, it's I don't know. Maybe there are people in the world who wake up in the morning and think, what horrible thing can I perpetrate today? What awfulness can I commit upon another human being today? There probably are. You know, there's that idiot in the White House who appears to be hell-bent every day on waking up and thinking, what can I do to cock up the world tomorrow? But, you know, and perhaps he'd have a stroke if he heard me saying we should all try to be happy and be kind to each other. But a little bit of kindness, just a little bit. And if we all do a little bit, no one has to do a lot. And that's what makes me happy. And I don't know, we're redressing the balance. I mean, we all feel wronged. I feel like the gods wronged me. You know, I've railed against them for some of the things that have happened in my life, and other times celebrated. And I think maybe sometimes it's arbitrary, but it's about who you are and how you feel about those things. And people talk about attracting things into your life and whether that's a balance or not. But on balance, my incarnation this time round has been awesome. I've been so lucky and fortunate, and I've lived a life of love and kindness with people around me. I've grown up happily, and, you know, I've been very fortunate, and my circumstances have been part of that. But I do think my attitude's become some of that too. And yet, on the other hand, some of the things that have happened have been utterly dreadful. You know, I've been in the absolute pits in the last 12 months. And now I'm back up at the heights again at the moment. And, you know, it goes in waves. It's that balance.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's an internal balance to strike first, and maybe you can look outwards from there about what other people are doing and how that goes.
Mm-hmm. So do you believe, like, continuing on, do you believe what you put out to the universe you'll get back, or?
To some extent, yes. To some extent, yes. I do believe that you set your own bar and your own standard. You set your own pattern. And if you're a good and decent and honest and kind and loving, passionate and compassionate person, then you tend to attract the similar energy currents, or whatever you want to call it, back into your own life. You know, I mean, there's it's an old joke. It's a joke with a bit of pathos, but it's the thing about the man who moves into a new area and he goes in the local pub and says to the barman, "I'm new in the area. What do people like round here?" And the barman says, "Well, what do they like where you used to live?" And he said, "Oh, the salt of the earth, best people I've ever met. They was very sorry to have left. Everyone was so friendly." He said, "Oh, they're just like that round here, sir." And then the next night, another guy who's just moved into the area comes in and says the same thing. What do people like round here? And the barman says, "Well, what do they like where you came from?" And he said, "Oh, I was glad to get away. Bunch of criminals and crooks." He said he couldn't trust anybody. Awful. They were dreadful people. He said, "Well, they're just like that round here, sir." And that's kind of the thing, you know, you like attracts like, and it's a matter of perception. So, I just want to say thanks, because I'm grateful, because the people that have come into my life at all times have by and large either given me some fun learning or love and kindness one way or another. Sometimes I've had to learn some lessons, and I've lost some people. And, you know, in the last few years, I've lost some friends and some very close people, and I lost my girlfriend in January, and it's been an interesting journey and an interesting perspective. I mean, I've chucked that. I know I don't mind telling people that personal stuff. I know a lot of your listeners know me. And, you know, you just, you could rail against the universe, but it isn't really the universe's fault. You know, what matters is what you do next. So what am I going to do next? I'm going to try to scrub away my way along a little highway, looking for another smile somewhere. And I'm finding it. And I'm finding that if you put out that that feeling of being a kind, loving, decent, genuine person. You attract those people into your life, and you don't really lose anything. Time isn't really that important. Oh gosh, that sounds like a reading from a script. Sounds like we've written a play or something.
Another question in the chat room. This is from Richard. He says, what do you think would be the main advantage to the human race if everyone embraced paganism?
The main advantage, I think we'd never have to worry about being bored, because I think we'd be very boring if we all embraced exactly the same thing. I think that the human race is, and life and our everything around us is so diverse and different. And, you know, difference is beautiful, and living it out is absolute bliss. And even the people who we think we have the most in common with are different. You know, you can become absolutely intimate with somebody who's completely opposite to you in other respects. And that's beautiful when your differences come together. So I think if we all thought the same thing, yeah, we'd never have to worry about being excited again, because I think it could be quite dull. But I do think, I mean, I'm glad to be to identify myself as pagan, and a lot of the people I know who are pagan are the kind of people who I would pick to be my friends if I could anyway, regardless of whether we got the P word to use or not. So, you know, if everybody could say that about themselves, that the circle of friends that they choose for themselves are the people who make them happy, or who help them to feel most happy and content, and are the people they admire most, you know, then that's it. And then that's great. I mean, whether it's the local canoeing club, the football team, paganism, Trump's America, or anything else, if you can genuinely say that you're putting yourself in a circle of people who you admire and respect and like, and who make you feel one and whole and good, what's wrong with that? That's it. So yeah, I do think the pagan people I know are wonderful. The community I'm a part of is amazing. And it's true to say that in my lifetime, the most amazing people I've ever met have all identified as pagan. All? Am I going to say all? Many of them have. Let's just say that. So yeah, I think if everybody embraced paganism, which it won't happen, you know, and it would be ridiculous. There wouldn't be anything else. You can't have something without having the opposite. You know, there's no point to a wheel if there's no gaps between the spokes. Well, I suppose there is. It's a bumpy journey, I guess, but you know. Gosh, we really have mixed the metaphors up now. You're going to have to shut me up, Sam, because I'm
Another question.
I sound besotted with my own voice, don't I?
No, fine. Another question in the chat room. Do you believe in reincarnation, either as a progression of or lesson learning process?
Personally, I do. I do. I think, yeah, this notion of reincarnation. I think that our incarnation, our descent into physical matter, to a body, to a living thing, isn't the ultimate definition of who we are. I think if you want to make it most simple, we're a physical form. We're that carries around a non-physical entity, a spirit, if you like, or a piece of energy, or a soul, whatever you want to call it. So, I mean, I have a friend, and she often says to me, I do have a friend, surprisingly. You know, there's people who can stand to listen to me talk like this for more than 5 minutes. And she often says to me, how's your day? How's the ride on the meat sack roller coaster today? And that's what I think we are. I think human beings are meat sacks on a roller coaster ride powered by ghosts. There you go. And I think that ghost has a continued existence that's beyond the 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time, that's beyond our physicality. And for that reason, I have to say, I think that there's absolutely every chance of reincarnating, and that we have that many of us have, or many of our bodies contain an energy or a spirit that's had a go at incarnating previously. I think I must have screwed it up. I must have messed it up. That's why they gave me this extraordinarily weird life this time round, to have another go. But so yes, personally I do, and that's quite a commonly held belief amongst pagans and witches, the idea that our spirit can continue outside of our body, or has an existence outside of our body, which is also therefore outside of the bounds of space and time, and therefore can come back for multiple lifetimes.
There we go. There's an interesting answer for everyone to think about in regards with reincarnation.
Well, thank you. I mean, I know I've come on these shows before, and when I've talked to your predecessors, they've often said, God, I thought about things in a different. You even said it. I thought about things differently. I am a thinker, but I think we all can be, and we all are. It floats my boat. You wouldn't believe what I'm thinking right now. What kind of crazy things are going through my brain right this minute.
Yeah.
I'm not telling you what they are, obviously.
It's all right. I might not want to know.
No, careful, because there are probably some perceptive listeners out there who probably clicked on the vibe, and I don't know, a series of strange imaginative thoughts is kind of where my mind likes to be, and I've loved doing this. I've loved doing this interview because it's got my imagination fired up, and I haven't spoken and felt like this for a while. It's not since last weekend.
Anyway, this is a question off Faz. She says, "Let's get."
Right. Okay.
She says, "How about explaining to the listeners all about Samhain and what it means to us Richies?"
Okay. So. Well, this answer goes out. Well, no, actually, this is Faz asking me and encouraging me to do that. So, Samhain, you pronounced it Samhain. Samhain or Samhain, or various different pronunciations, is a Celtic word which refers to the fire festival that's coming up that we more commonly know as Halloween. And it marks the point halfway between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice. And it is, in the old ways of thinking of things, it is the beginning of winter. It's the end of spring and summer. So, yeah, Faz is great because she has she's the most wonderful person that I know in my life at the minute. She has this way of getting me to say the right thing, or to steer me in the right direction to talk about this subject, which was my way of just playing for time while I think about what I want to say about Samhain. Halloween is there's several aspects to it in the way that pagans perceive the ongoing, what we'd call the wheel of the year. And by that, I mean the solar year, the calendar that has become a Julian calendar. So we can see, every time the Earth goes round the sun, 364 and a quarter days, there's various bits of that. There are 2 equinoxes, 2 solstices. The solstices are the longest and shortest days, and the equinoxes are the days where the night and day, the time that the sun is in the sky and is invisible, are equal. And in the past, our ancestors looked at agricultural calendars. And also seasonal. It was agricultural and seasonal. And this is the bit where our pagan Celtic ancestors would have looked at the stores that they've made up for the winter from the harvest and wondered whether they would get through it. The darkness that's coming to us, I mean, it's not great. It's not some people, I like the dark time of the year, but in the past, it was a matter of life and death. If there wasn't enough food from the harvest, if there wasn't enough crops in, then, people would have died. And the dark and this time of year are frightening, or were frightening. And one of the things that people did habitually, or as a tradition, was to make fun. This is a brilliant human trait. Humor's awesome. I mean, love, passion, and stuff like that is awesome, but humor is a really powerful force, in my opinion, personally. And to be able to mock something, to mock the winter, to mock the darkness, and to mock your own fears, that really is the sort of secret ancient pagan. I said I'd reveal some secrets. That's the secret source of an awful lot of Halloween traditions. Jack-o'-lanterns, the pumpkins, anything that we can make kind of somewhere between macabre and frightening and funny all at once. It's mocking the darkness. It's almost daring it to do its worst. And that's a real power. And that was really one of the themes of this festival for our ancestors and for us now, is the idea that we're looking forward into the darkness of winter and mocking it and laughing at what it's, do your worst, darkness. And at the same time, this is the time of year for looking backwards. the Roman god Janus had a part to play at this time of year, because he's the god with the two heads that look opposite directions. One looks one way, one looks the other. So it's looking back on the year. So in some ways, Samhain is effectively pagan New Year. It's if there was a place on that wheel and on that circle, then that you had to say was the beginning and the end. Not that there is a beginning or an end, but it's that point and it's that place where you might call it pagan New Year. So we're looking back at what we've done, what we've had, what we've achieved, what we've wanted, and then what we've lost, and looking at what we want to carry forward with us that we would perhaps like to lose or drop or leave behind, and also what we want to embrace going forward. But we do so knowing that it's the dark time of the year. It's the time when the earth goes to sleep, when she descends to the underworld and the darkness and the barrenness of winter. The knowing all the while that deep down there's that seed of fertility, there's that seed of life that's still there. And of course, traditionally, that's one of the aspects of Samhain. One of the other aspects is the notion that at this moment of, if you like, balance between the past and the future, the things from the past, the people we've known and loved, the spirits and energies we've connected with previously are very close to us. It's a time for the dead. It's a time for the ancestors, for the mighty dead, as we would call them, those who have gone before us, those we've loved and who we imagine we've lost, and who we would like to be in touch with again. And it's a time for reaching through the veil between our physical, dense world of form and the spiritual world of force, where time and space are just nonsense. They're only disguises. And we can find those that we've loved and those spirits and souls that we're close to. And those that we're close to here in Incarnation 2, we can kind of join up and be in communication spiritually and magically. And that's another reason why Samhain is, people say, oh, it's the big one in the pagan year. It's probably true. I mean, if you're a witch and you follow the cycles of the moon, then the full moon either side of Samhain are the two most powerful ones. And they're the time for doing powerful transformative magic. And by magic, I mean working on yourself to change the world and to change your world. So Samhain's a kind of a big one in the pagan year. So thanks, Faz, for that. It was a good question. I'll see you at the full moon.
And I found that very interesting as well, because obviously I kind of know what Samhain is, but right. It was good to read what it's about, and if that makes sense, that was good.
It does. I mean, there's lots more, but I mean, I think the thing that you can look at all the traditions, you can just look at it, and if you can look at it with that extra eye of understanding and see in there that it's to do with mocking the darkness and mocking our own fears in order to overcome them, that's a pretty good way of viewing the traditions and the theme.
Another question in the chat room, what's just literally come in a few seconds ago. This is from Debbie again. She says, as a lot of the listeners may not be pagan, could you choose your top 3 myths or misconceptions about pagans that you'd like to correct people about?
Yeah, my top 3. Okay, that's interesting. So, I mean, even I've been around a little bit, but even I can remember once upon a time that they, the interviewers and the media, the question that they wanted to ask, the question, the things that they said. So you're a pagan and a witch. Is it true you do human sacrifice? Do you drink the blood of babies and things? And over the years, that obviously the answer is no. Just by the way, just in case there's any of your listeners who are really that inclined. Of course not. We drink the blood of we drink the blood of people who ask questions like that. That's what I used to say to interviewers. But those questions have changed over the years. Those misconceptions have changed. And that became, is it true you sacrifice animals? And I don't know where they got this idea of sacrifice. I don't know why the idea of the mainstream society's view of paganism was to do with hurting or harming or sacrificing. I mean, it's certainly true that all of us, our society, has very commonly, as part of the harvest, at the start and the end of the harvest, you would sacrifice a bit of the the crops that you gathered in. You know, there's John Barleycorn's story, and there's various narratives like that. But the idea of actual sacrifice of another living creature, blood sacrifice, is not something that's to do with modern paganism. It just isn't. And that was a question that kind of transmuted and transformed. And there was various other ones that used to go, that the press used to find particularly scandalizing, and they used to love particularly. Having ritual and magical sex was another one. Being naked, and corrupting the minds of others. These things that witches and pagans have been accused of. So all of those are as much nonsense and half truth now as they ever were. They're as much to be refuted now as they ever were. But they don't seem to be the questions that people ask anymore. So I've been asked, that's bought me enough time to try and wonder which are my favourite ones to dispel, or the ones I'd most like to dispel. I'd most like to dispel the idea that witches and pagans are in any way a negative influence on others around them in society, that we're in some way sinister, and that because we're in the minority, I think that's it. That's my big point. Just because we're a minority, it doesn't make us wrong. You know, minorities change the world, and minorities change the world for the better. You know, and I think in the end, this is a planet of 6 billion minorities. Everybody's individual and unique, and we stagger around trying to find common ground, but actually, we're in a minority. So, don't perceive the minority as negative. Would be one of them. The other one that they've started to ask, the more benign members of the press, and again, present company accepted, because I know you're a little more enlightened. But what they like to ask me now is it true you dance around naked and jump over bonfires at midsummer? And I like that question. That's a particular myth I like to address, because I have what I fancy in my own head is a rather clever answer for that. And the answer is dance around naked and jump over the bonfire. Well, it would be far too dangerous to do it with your clothes on. And that usually gets me out of having to really, properly answer the question truthfully or not. So the myth that we dance around naked over bonfires, that's a favourite, because it's not one I care to dispel or to neither confirm nor deny, as we might say. So, goodness me. And was it a top 3 that you wanted, or was it just my top ones?
She said 3.
Oh, God. Okay. So, what's the third? What's the third myth that I'd like to dispel about paganism and witchcraft? That we're all in some way disaffected members of society, that we're not proper members of society, that we're all weirdo, strange, odd hippies who completely and honestly and totally embrace we like it so much being different to the rest of society. We don't want to be part of the rest of society. We don't want to be part of a human community. And the truth is that there are people within paganism and within every walk of life who like being different and unique, and who like cocking a snook at the mainstream. But that is not representative. That's not representative of a view of the majority of pagans. We have been shunned by the wider society and accused of things that we haven't done, and in the past, hanged and burned and murdered for our views and beliefs and opinions. And in actual fact, we're worthy and proper people who could take a very important and useful role in society, and often do in the background quietly and get on with it in a way that's good. So I'd like to dispel the myth that that we're not proper members of society because we've got views that are not the most common and popular. So I suppose maybe that's the first one. Again, don't kick out the minorities. Minorities have a point.
Ooh. And there we go.
Right, there we go. Sorry, that's that one. Yes. So, three myths to dispel.
This is obviously a question for me, and it might seem a bit stupid, but
not as stupid as the answer you're going to get.
Do you like make offerings?
Okay, so there's a kind of there's a principle in the way that magic works that talks about a kind of, this is what our ancient ancestors did. The first religion that human beings invented and artificed was the idea that that if you depict something in a symbolic form and then act on the symbol, you can actually influence the thing that it symbolizes. So in the same way that if you take a piece of the first bit of the crops of the first bit of the harvest and you give them back to the earth, in some way you are symbolically saying we acknowledge where our fertility and where our nutrition came from, and we're handing it back. And in a spiritual correspondent way, we're saying here we're prepared to give something up, to sacrifice it for the greater good of it continuing, and because we want to acknowledge and accept where we're at. So I'm sorry, Sam, could you just rephrase the question again?
So, it's hard to so do you like, when you do go do your sew-ins and your other I don't know if you call them activities, do you make offerings like you did back then, if that makes sense? Sort of.
Well, no, actually, yes, that's completely true. So, for example, this summer, towards the end of the harvest, I was at a camping event, and we spent quite considerable time and effort building a model out of straw and wood and things like that. We built a model of a man, of a male figure that symbolized the sun god, and then we set fire to him, and we symbolized him giving of himself, giving the last of his solar energy for the year in order that the crops might be fertilized. And we burned him and we danced around him. And having done so, we called for him to come back, which sounds a bit counterproductive, but we made a symbolic gesture. But what we did in a magical sense was we poured our energy into creating something physical, which we then effectively destroyed, or at least, used that energy back up, and did it gladly and willingly and with love and kindness, because that proved a point, that turned the wheel, that proved that we understood what we were doing and what we are doing and how we live. And to us, that was kind of symbolic and serious, very serious. I mean, it's quite frivolous because it went up with a hell of a blaze and we had a really good old time and drank some mead and danced around it. And a lot of people who were there, did the same thing, and maybe were just caught up in the excitement of it all. But, it's to us, that's really important. That's symbolic that you can, that the act of sacrifice in that sense, and goodness me, I hope none of your listeners did have a stroke if they'd just walked in to the middle of this conversation. But, this notion of sacrifice in this sense, that you've created something which you're then willing to destroy as a magical symbolic gesture, that's kind of important. And that's something that a lot of pagans and witches probably do in a lot of their rituals. Because energy is just there to be, it is energy. You can gather it up and you can, shovel it around, and you can use it to shield, and you can use it to push outwards or draw inwards. But actually the sharing of it and having gathered and stored something to be able to give it away as a gift, that's kind of a big thing. If you look at certain pagan cultures, so if you look across the continent to what's now called America, but didn't used to be called America, the idea was that the gods' first gift to human beings was a plant that they could then use as a gift to give on. Currency, if you like, sort of magical spiritual currency. So to sacrifice something, to give it up, is a symbolic gesture of showing how much value it's got. There's a lot of people walking around the world who know the price of things without knowing the value. Mm. Gosh, we got all serious again.
So, see, you've got me very interested in all of this now.
Okay.
So this is another
must have cast a spell on you, eh?
Binky question I want. Well, this is what I've got from that last bit you said. So you possibly, I want to obviously kind of make this question so it doesn't offend anyone or anything like that. It probably won't, but anyway. So is kind of your belief system that you give back to what? So say like with a crop, the earth and all that is given to you guys, so that's you believe in giving it back, so he continuously wants to keeps giving it you, if that makes sense. That may not make sense at all, but
no, I think that did make sense to me, and actually you might have expressed it certainly in a shorter term than I did. That's exactly it. Yes, it keeps going, and it's that acknowledgement that we don't really own anything, well, I don't know. I'm harking back to Douglas Adams and the Hitchhiker's Guide, and to the race and the civilization that just they sent all the useless people off on these big spaceships, and they adopted leaves as currency, and then realized that because there were so many leaves, they couldn't spend them, and everybody was too rich, and it didn't have any value. So they took the stupid option of burning down all the trees. And in some respects, that's really what Golga Frinchans was the name. Golga Frincha was the name of the planet. If you look up Douglas Adams in his, and I have to say, a fictional work, by the way, but with some pathos. Yes, by sacrificing something, it demonstrates that we have an understanding and we know the value. We know its value, and that's exactly it. If we have something, it's only lent to us. All of the gifts of the earth and of the physical world and of the spheres of our existence that are physical, they're only gifts that are lent. We're only borrowing a bit of time here. It's we're not. These are not things that we own. To the idea that we could, when all of the planets burned up and there's nothing left, we'll realize that we can't eat money. Your bank balance doesn't matter. Your bank balance castle is just a fearful construct. It's not true. It's not something that's substantial or sustainable. What's sustainable is who you are and how kind you are and what you do with your time and the way you look at yourself and look at other people. And that's to me anyway, that's far more important than the possessions of things. So sometimes the act of giving stuff away, you have to give everything in order to gain the world. And when you've got nothing left, then you're at your richest. I was talking with somebody really, really important to me, somebody very special and important to me recently about this. You become rich by understanding what's of great value and what you've got, not by having a lot of things, but by making your wants few and identifying your needs and tailoring those and accepting the joy and bliss that's on offer. And you know what? You know what that is? It's happiness and love. That's all it is. And that's what the universe is made of, love and happiness. Two great pillars with a central balancing one, if you want to get all occult about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, Sam, that was an abrupt ending to that question, but no, that's it.
Right.
Love, bliss and happiness, and if you find somebody in your life who understands that and shares the same level of those values with you, hang on to them. Hang on to them and treat them kindly and love them and care for them, because those people are rare and they're rare in your life. And when you find somebody with the same set of values as you can then set forth on a journey of adventure and wonder that's beyond the heights of the gods. I'm writing poetry and drama again, aren't I? Life is a poem. Life is a drama. Life's a song, and it's a beautiful thing. And it's fragile, and it could just go at any moment. So, happiness and love and kindness. Mm-hmm. And passion and adventure and a few other bits of fun and naughtiness too. So, yeah.
So we have a few minutes left of the show. So do you have anything coming up you'd like to share?
Excuse me, madam. So I thought we'd get to the smutty remarks eventually, because your predecessors, like that dreadful Kerry Greenaway, she's always encouraging me to think rude things. That one. Yeah. What have I got coming up? Oh God, careful. Well, funnily enough, I'm going to do a little crossover thing in a week or two's time, because we're visiting Paracon, and I'm giving a talk at Paracon about witchcraft and Wicca and about the history of it. It might be a little more structured than this ramble. So Paracon is the place to be. Paracon is the place for people who are both pagan or paranormal community or scene, or just curious or interested, to go and hear interesting people talk about fascinating subjects, and who spark and stimulate these kind of conversations that get us to thinking about the nature of things. And the Paracon is a great, I've been so honoured to be asked to come and speak there. I feel very honoured to be asked to come and speak as a pagan and as a witch, and to be able to share some of this stuff. But I'm more excited to be, or we're more excited to be going to be among people who have got stimulating things to say to us. And there's some fantastic, absolutely fantastic people there who have got the most fascinating stories and adventures that they've had in their lives with paranormal investigation. And I mean, some of these people blow my mind. I met people at Paracon in previous years who have been amongst the people who have sparked my imagination the most. And I'll be hopefully looking forward to seeing some of them again this time. So So that's what I've got coming up. And I've been a fool because I've double booked myself and I'm supposed to be at the biggest witchcraft convention in Europe the same weekend. So in true Ashley traditions, I'm going to do both. And luckily, I've got somebody beautiful and amazing who's going to help me run around the country doing that and be able to do both. And we'll enjoy it together and hopefully have a weekend of totally exhausted happiness. So Paracon, Witchfest. And on Saturday, I'm playing a concert in Rugeley at the Rose Theatre, supporting Incubus Succubus. So if you're anywhere near that part of the West Midlands, near Stoke-on-Trent or Rugeley, have a look on Facebook, look for the Rose Theatre, and come and see me play some songs about the stuff that we've been talking about. I've done a plug.
And obviously, before we say goodbye, guys, just a quick plug again. If anybody wants to obviously come to Sage Paracon, tickets are running very low now because it's about 2 weeks away. And if anybody still wants to get tickets, you can at www.sageparacon.co.uk.
Get your tickets and come and see us. Come and say hello.
Yeah. And obviously, me and Carl are going to be there. Obviously, you've got amazing speakers like Ashley and others. I won't give too much away because you can go check it out on the website. And I want to obviously thank everybody who has listened in tonight. The chat room has been on fire, which is great to see. And obviously, of course, if you miss any of our shows, you can just click on our name. If you are listening to us on Spreaker, you can just click on our name, Parasearch Radio, and that'll take you onto our user account, and you can see your previous shows there, as well as you can click on shows if you just want to listen to shows. You can also find us on YouTube as Parasearch Radio and Facebook. It's a good night from Ashley.
It is good night from me, and I noticed that you've got me labelled as explicit on your website. Thank you. That pleases me greatly. Thanks to all of you. Good night.
And it's a good night from me.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.